Thank you, Emerson. Well, what to say, really? I don't think I've got much in the way of an introduction just now. But I guess you could say we're here together sharing about something that is a mystery. It can't be known. This isn't something, what's being pointed to, if you can even call it a pointing to, is unknowable. It's not something that can be discovered, because the suggestion here is there's actually nothing hidden. There's nothing that needs to be found. There's nothing missing from this. The suggestion is this is the absolute already. So because this is the absolute already, there can't be anything apart from or aside from or separate to this, which is the absolute. It includes everything. So I guess you could say what's being shared here is a mystery, and that everything is the mystery. It's no thing being everything, and that's the mystery, which can't be explained. It can't be talked about in words. It's really something energetic. This meeting is about something apparently energetic. So the words can't really describe what's being pointed to. So there's, and also in that sense, because this is a mystery and this is about something energetic, this isn't something that can be grasped or understood by the mind. This isn't something that can be taught, because this doesn't know something to teach. Really, it's the suggestion this is just nothing being everything, and it is, and that is the absolute. There is nothing separate from that. So there is no separation. But of course, what can arise within this absoluteness, within this mystery, is a sense of knowing, and that is a knowing of I. And this knowing of I is separation. Seems to become this, what I would call a separate experience, or the separate experience. So the I, or the me, the individual, whatever you want to call it, tends to experience itself as being separate from the whole. What comes out of that sense of separation is a need, or a longing, a need to find something to make this in some way whole again. But again, the suggestion is this is already the absolute. So there is nothing missing, there is nothing separate, because that arising of the I is actually illusory. It actually isn't real. It's a false claim. It's a false claiming that I am, which seems to hide the natural reality, which is the absolute, which is nothing being everything, which is this unknowableness. So I'll open up if anyone wants to ask a question or type something into the chat, and I'll respond. Thank you. Question from Rajiv in the chat. Can you say something on the statement, what is, never was? Yeah, so what's seen in the end, the me experiences itself as being real. It lives in the story of itself. It lives and moves in the story of itself. And from within the story, or from within the dream of self, that dream appears to be something real. It appears to be a real experience. So to the individual, what is seems to be this story, seems to be the story that I am real, I have a life, I'm making choices and decisions, that I am choosing to move my life in a particular direction, or I am looking for something which I think is going to bring about a sense of completeness or wholeness, or something that's going to add something to me and to my life. So that whole experience, the seeking, that whole separate experience to the individual seems very real from within that experience. When that whole experience collapses in what we so-called liberation, is what's recognized is that whole experience never was. It was never really happening. It was happening in a kind of a dream state. It was a false claim. It was never real to begin with. So actually what's seen in the end is that whole thing was never real. It was never happening. So there was actually nothing to fall away. And that's kind of the paradox in how we talk about this. And it's one of the impossibilities really about this message, is that it can never be said, because it just doesn't make any sense at all. But you could say that what seemed to be in that Neil seemed to experience himself as a real person, when that whole experience collapsed, it was recognized that it never was. There was never a Neil. So there's actually, in that sense, no one to die. There's nothing that needs to fall away, because, as I said already in the beginning, this is already the absolute. So everything that appears or can appear is the absolute. There's nothing aside from or separate to the absolute. It can even appear as this separate experience of being a real person who is in this story and making choices and decisions and has a life. It looks like Rajiv added to that. When I came across this quote on Jim's page, it was automatic and touching. Ah, yeah, okay. Thank you, Rajiv. Message from Angelica. Are my feelings as illusory as my thoughts? So there's no suggestion here that feelings and thoughts are illusory. What's being suggested as being illusory is that feelings and thoughts are happening to a person, that feelings and thoughts are personal. So when there is that personal experience, when feelings and thoughts arise, what seems to happen is the individual claims those feelings and thoughts as being my feelings and my thoughts. And that sort of creates a problem then for the individual, because these are my feelings and my thoughts, I need to manage them in some way. Some feelings are welcome, some feelings are unwelcome. There's good feelings, there's bad feelings, unpleasant feelings, uncomfortable feelings. And so to me, it seems to feel that it has to manage these in some way, and that thoughts and feelings are a problem. But they're not. Thoughts, feelings, they're just completely, they are the absolute arising of thoughts and feelings. They're not happening to someone. So I wouldn't describe thoughts and feelings as illusory. I would say that thoughts and feelings are just appearing for no one. Question in the chat from Dave: is free will an illusion? Free will is part of the illusion. But there is a someone who has free will. So yes, free will only seems to appear, or the idea or the experience of free will only seems to appear in the illusion of self. And Chiel Claimer asks, what do you mean with appearing? What seems to appear? What is and isn't? This is an appearance. So when we're from within the separate experience, so to the individual, to the apparent individual, because it experiences itself as being real, it somehow makes everything else that appears into something real. This is a real pen, a real piece of paper, a real desk, a real laptop. This is real speaking happening now. This is a real meeting happening now. Because that's how it experiences itself. It seems to kind of apply that to everything else. And it does that by claiming it and knowing it. That knowing of it seems to turn it into something real. So when I say that this is just an appearance, that's what seems to be left after that experience is over, that what is just an appearance, which is and isn't. And I would say it is and isn't because this appearance really can't be described. As I say, it is unknowable. That's not to say that the brain doesn't recognize pen, paper. It just seems to be an automatic function. But the knowing and the claiming in the energetic sense for when there is an individual, the claiming as a belonging to someone doesn't happen anymore. So what's left is really just an appearance, which is no thing being everything, no thing appearing to be everything. Another question in the chat from Rajiv. Is this message taking us to the state of our minds when we were just 1 second old? So this message isn't taking anyone anywhere, because this message doesn't even recognize that there is a someone who needs to go somewhere or who needs to return to some kind of a state of mind, even when we were just 1 second old. So it really has nothing to do with the state of mind. And as I've said before in different meetings, I would go as far as to say that there actually isn't a mind. The mind seems to be the mental expression of the individual. It seems to be that contracted energy arising in the mental sense. It seems to be a claiming of that individual experience in the mental sense of the mind. So it has nothing to do with the state of mind, because I would say that in apparent liberation, that not only does the embodied sense of separation fall away, but also the sense of one as having a mind also collapses. Message from Kane. Hi Neil, is this message just as amazing and stunning as when it was first apparently heard? Yeah, it's always new, it's always fresh. When I was a seeker, I used to listen to this message a lot. I don't tend to do that now. But yeah, this message is, I mean, it's amazing. And here, that this is a sharing about a mystery, about something that can't be known, is what makes it so amazing. When something's known, it's boring, it's dead, it just holds no appeal. When we're talking about something that can't be known, that this is just appearing with nothing behind it. It's complete chaos appearing as ordered. It's the absolute appearing relative. And then to me, that is amazing. This is an amazing message. It's a non-message though, really. There isn't really a message for someone or to someone, and there's no one here sharing a message. This is the absolute, apparently sharing a message. And another question from Shale. But isn't appearing already an idea? Whatever is, and what that really is, nobody knows already, right? Yeah, absolutely. There's no one to know. So it's not that there's someone here who has just realized that this is unknowing, or realized that they don't know, or who has in some way found some kind of way to let go of knowing or become detached from knowing. It's just simply in the end that there is no one to know what this is. The me is the knower. When the me collapses, then obviously there is no one left to know what this is. So it is just what appears. And question, I think, from Maria. You say there is no me, so there is no free will, but there is an apparent story. In the story, there is free will, or everything is just happening and the mind is interpreting it as free will. Well, there isn't really a story. That there is a story is also a story. So the individual would say something, the individual in the story of itself or within the separate experience would be convinced that it has free will when it's making choices and decisions. But what's seen in the end ultimately is there was never anyone to make choices and decisions, and there was never anyone to have free will. But yes, from within the dream, then that does seem to be the case. But what's revealed in the end is that was actually never happening. And a message from Angelica. Is there a heart if there is no mind? Well, apparently there is, but I don't really get that. This message doesn't really talk about the knowing of the heart and as being separate from the knowing of the mind and follow your heart and that kind of thing. That would be a teaching of some kind. Yeah. So yes, apparently there's a heart in the body and it pumps blood. But yeah. And question from Kane. What did you think when you first fell away? Well, there was no one left to think anything in the end. There was just obviousness. It is just obvious in the end that there was no one as having thoughts or to think about what this is or isn't, or what this is about. The questions just fall away, so that it's not like there is someone left going, oh my God, there's no one. Or, oh my God, this is no thing, or this is the absolute. It's just recognized that the absolute and that no one was all there was already. The me's convinced that the end of the story will be an epilogue, and that it will get to live in an epilogue called liberation, and that's just not the case. It's just the story is no more in that it never happened, so there is no epilogue to the story of me. And a message from Bob. The way he explained the situation is like humans are hand puppets without any sense of control. If this is so, then the conversations happens in this channel are just chit chat. This is all just chit chat. But to me, that makes it sound like if we're humans as being hand puppets, that there's something behind this making it all work, which kind of is drifting into the realm of kind of God and spirit and Brahman, and there's the stuff behind it, the unseen stuff that makes it all work, or that this is in some way preordained, that this is in some way going somewhere, that there is something behind this. One of the most startling, shocking things about this is there's actually nothing behind it whatsoever. It's completely empty. The appearance is completely empty. That emptiness is also its fullness, because in that emptiness it needs nothing because it's already empty, so it's already whole and complete. But that's a shock, that there is nothing behind this. There's no creator, there's no excuse me, there's nothing. It's as though there is nothing even holding this together. This shouldn't even be as it appears. It could be anything. And that really is a shock at first. Who realizes, message from Changing Ears, who realizes the dream if there is no one? No one realizes the dream. There's just a recognition that the dream was never happening. The dream appears to come to an end with the recognition that there was never anyone dreaming or anyone to dream. It was just never happening. And question from Chael, what do you mean with a me? Isn't a me just a word for a body here and you a word for a body there? So in this message, me refers to the sense of separation. It refers to the individual sense of being a someone. This sense of being a someone arises out of a contraction in the body. Seems to be a tension, a contraction in the body. And the sense of it's a knowing, it seems to arise with this contraction, which brings about a sense of here, which then becomes a claiming of I am here. with that claiming, with that knowing, with the arising of that contraction, seems to be the beginning of that separate experience or of the individual experience. And that is the experience of I am in me, or I am here. And that automatically seems to create a sense of separation. I am here and I am separate. So with this message, when we're talking about a me, we're talking about that experience, that sense of being a someone. We're not necessarily identifying that with the body. Bodies are just a part of the appearance. Bodies just move around and they talk and do stuff and eat food and go to the toilet. They're just bodies. They are just as much a part of the appearance. But one of the most amazing things about bodies is there's nothing in them. There's no one in them. A body might have individual characteristics, but there's no one in them. They're completely empty and are just the absolute appearing as bodies. And question from Lance: any advice for someone who keeps cycling through seemingly having it and then losing it? None at all, I'm afraid. That just seems to be what happens in some ways. So this happens regardless of what the individual may or may not think about it. This is acausal, apparent liberation. Even to call it liberation makes it sound, I know it makes it sound like it's something that happens, and it really isn't. It's acausal. The apparent falling away of the apparent me is apparently acausal. So there's no advice. That just seems to be what happens. What seems to be with glimpses, if that's what you're alluding to, then there can be a falling away of that separate experience, and then the natural reality can be seen, I suppose. But then what quite often happens is the individual comes back, or the me comes back and claims that experience for itself. And the other thing I would say about your comment is no one ever has it. So it isn't a case of having it and then losing it. There's nothing to have. What seems to fall away is the need to have something. What also seems to fall away is the sense of something being lost. So the whole having it, losing it is still appearing in the dream of separation. Question from Earl Gibbs: is this utterly simplistic message more about unknowing and the dropping away of conditioned beliefs? Not necessarily. This message isn't really about anything. As I said before, this message is really pointing to a mystery. So nothing is said. There isn't really a message. There is nothing being conveyed within this message as such. So it isn't a case of dropping away of conditioned beliefs. So when I was a seeker, I had lots of different beliefs at different times, and my beliefs seemed to change. I would follow one teacher or another, or I would do one sort of practice or another at some point. And I suppose you could say there was a noticing when I was a seeker that certain conditioned beliefs, I was absolutely convinced it was about this type of meditation, and all those other ones suck. They're no good. This is the way to go. And then that would drop and change for some reason, and then the same thing would happen with something else or another practice. So I would say that the kind of the conditioned beliefs and conditioning and beliefs, that's always fluctuating and changing anyway. The individual does seem to surround itself with certain kind of beliefs in a way. And I think what this message can do is certainly expose some of those beliefs. It can certainly challenge some of those beliefs that seem to kind of beliefs or misunderstandings around liberation or awakening, whatever you want to call it. For example, this message will expose to say that there is one who can become liberated. then this message, the words in this message would then expose that as being not true. There isn't one who can become liberated. Liberation is the end of the one who needs to become liberated. And a question from Dave, what is awareness? So awareness is a dualistic function. It's a knowing. And so this isn't this message isn't about becoming aware of being aware of, or of abiding in awareness, or coming to know oneself as pure awareness. That's still within the dream of separation, that there is one who can know themselves as pure awareness, or that there is even pure awareness. In order for there to be awareness, there has to be something for it to be aware of, which immediately sets up two things: the awareness and then what it's aware of. If there was nothing for awareness to be aware of, what would it be aware of? How would it be aware? So I think a lot of awareness teachings, they're really talking about the knowing of I am, but more in its kind of more fundamental, stripped back essence, which, and they would call it true nature, or the ground of being, or coming to know that I am that, or I am the space within which experience arises, or I am the screen that the movie's played on. Really, that's all just still happening in the dualistic dream, I'm afraid. I think I think that some people can, or the individual can have an experience of kind of stepping back and realizing I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, I am not what arises, I am the observer, I am, and to a certain extent within the dream of separation, that's true. But that's not what's being shared here. What's being shared here is actually the end of that whole construct. This is the end of awareness. That there is no subject object, there is no subjective or objective for awareness to function. It's the end of the essence of I am. It's the end of I am altogether. In fact, it's the recognition that there was never an I am to realize oneself as I am. It's just a total dream. Is Rupert Spira wrong? No, not at all. It's a completely different conversation. And message from Angelica. Can love for another person still happen with no me? Yeah, but it's not for another person. It's not a love as from a person to a person. But that's already what's happening. So if there is love arising, then there is just love arising. That's the absolute appearing as love. There's nothing personal about that at all. Of course, the individual claims that love for another person as being personal. So that can make love quite complicated. Love's quite complicated for the individual. There's lots of songs written about love. Have you ever noticed? About how complicated it all is. So the individual, as with everything that arises, claims it and turns it into something very complex and nuanced, because that's how it tends to experience itself. But yes, love can arise. Anything can arise, of course. Yeah, it's just not personal. So it's very simple, very uncomplicated, very just immediate. What is appearing as that. And another message from Chiel. I don't understand what you mean with a contracted energy or separation, other than this body is aware of itself and able to distinguish this body from other bodies or things or whatever there may be. So there's no way to know that there is a contraction in the body. But the separate experience that's being described in this meeting, it seems to arise out of a contraction in the body, a kind of a tension. And it's just, there's just no way it can be sensed until that contraction apparently dissolves away. It's in everything. It's embodied. It's in the fingernails. It's in the toenails. It's in the eyelashes. I would say it's in the tips of the hair, but I haven't really got any. It's in the tips of the ears. It's at the back of the eyes. It's in everything. It's cellular. It's a meta tension, which also seems to arise in everything else as it arises in the body. And it seems to be that it is out of this contraction or this tension, this contracted energy, that the separate experience or the me experience seems to arise. And I say again, bodies are just bodies. They are just part of the appearance. They are just no thing appearing as a body. So, and to answer, can this body distinguish itself from other bodies? Well, apparently it can, yes. If this nose was itching, I wouldn't start scratching another nose. I wouldn't be scratching a nose, but this body wouldn't start scratching another nose. Wouldn't go down very well on the train either. Question from Dave: what is the end of I am? The recognition that it never was. Excuse me. There isn't an I am. There never is. And in a way, that's a huge shock in the end, but it's also obvious. It's also equally obvious in the end that there was never a someone doing anything. There was never anything separate. We were never cast out of paradise. There was never anyone to be cast out of paradise. Another question from Dave. So what does I am that mean by Nisargadatta? I have to say, I'm not that familiar with Nisargadatta. I think I read some of his stuff a little while ago. But I wouldn't say I am that. To me, that still sounds like that separate experience. I don't know what he's saying by that, and I would have to perhaps have a look at that a little bit more. But I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say I am that. I would say that really what's being pointed to here, or what's being suggested here, is the end of I am. With the arising of I, there seems to be a that. And yes, I think in some ways the individual can realize itself as being that. And to me, that sounds a little bit like a realization or a coming to know that I am everything, or that I am one with everything. I don't know if that's what he meant, because I'm not familiar with his teaching. So I'm not disregarding that. I'm just saying that that's not something I would say, because for me that would sound like a claiming of the I am still. And what really is being pointed to here is the end of the I am altogether. That there never was an I to be an am. And a question from Rajiv. Is nothing is happening same as saying what is never was? Well, there was only ever nothing happening. Nothing ever happens. So there wasn't a what is to be never was. Nothing ever happens. There's nothing happening. Nothing ever happens. Which is really disappointing, I know. It's really boring. You don't want liberation. It's really boring. Nothing ever happens. Oh, that's a nice compliment. Thank you, Dave. I won't read that out. There's no one here to be that, but thank you. Comment again from Rajiv. Nothing ever happens is this message in a nutshell. In a way, yeah. In a way. I think if I was going to put this message in a nutshell, which you can't really do, but I would say it's that there is no one. There's no one here. There's no one at this meeting, which is impossible to accept. It's an and I understand that it's an absolute impossibility to accept. Comment from Kane. Any plans on a second book? Not really. There hasn't been much coming up recently, I have to say. I've always been a writer. I've always enjoyed writing. It's always been something that's been quite natural for this character. Something about this character that enjoys words and writing and poetry. So yeah, I'm sure a second book will come at some stage, but there hasn't been much coming up yet. One of the curses with this is laziness. There's far less of an urgency to do anything. So as much as I enjoyed writing the first book, and it felt like a really kind of pure expression, and it was written very, very quickly. The real ball ache was doing all the editing myself and the self-publishing, and I just kind of thought I would put it out there and see what happens. So if anyone's read it and there's commas missing or capitals in the wrong place, then you know that was just me getting very fed up with the editing process. But no real plans yet. But I'm sure a second book will happen at some point. I do have some ideas come up now and again. Yeah. Comment from Rajiv. Absolutely impossible, but absolutely undeniable. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think for those who resonate with this message, there is just an undeniability to it. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It makes no sense for any of you. I don't know how many people are listening on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. Not very many, I should think. I'm amazed there's any of you. It is an absolute impossibility. But I know for me as a seeker, when I first heard this message, there was an undeniability about it. I just couldn't deny it. As much as I may have wanted to at times, I just couldn't deny what was being said. There was some resonance on a much deeper energetic level. It was almost like the no thing here was recognizing the no thing in what was being shared in a way. So it's very difficult. It's impossible to describe again, really. Yasmin said, I read your book. It was nice like a breeze. Oh, thank you, Yasmin. That's very sweet. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Another message from Shale. I hope I'm saying that right. Isn't anything you say about what is knowing, including the claim that this is everything and nothing? Why say anything about what is if it is totally unknowable? Also, a me or no me is knowing, right? Well, okay, so there's a few questions there. I'll break it down. Isn't anything you say about what is knowing? Well, this is coming out of an unknowing, because in the end, all there is unknowing. But I would say that anything that is said about what is a story. Because as I said in the beginning, this is a mystery. It just can't be described. And that's not because it's so abstruse and complex and far out and wild. It's very, very simple and very, very ordinary, but just can't. There's no one to grasp it or to get a hold of it, to then present it and go, here you are, here it is, this is what it's about. It's just completely ungraspable, completely unknowable. It is a mystery. So the next part of your comment was including the claim this is everything and nothing. Okay, so there's no one here making a claim that this is everything and nothing. It's just words. They just seem to be words that come closer to what's being described or what's being attempted to be shared here. So the next part was, why say anything about what is if it is totally unknowable? Because it's great fun, don't you think? And also a me or no me is knowing, right? Well, no, I would disagree with that. I would say the experience of the me or of the individual is a knowing. It seems to be the me that is knowing everything or attempting to know everything by claiming everything. Actually, what is already is unknowing. So knowing itself is a dream. So in the end, there's no one to know that there's no one, and there's no one to not know that there's no one. And question from L. Gibbs, is only what is mean the same thing as nothing ever happens? Well, there is just what apparently is, what apparently arises, which is no thing happening. So everything is no thing appearing to happen. Angelica asks, what's the difference between a me and a character? With this message, really, the character I would describe as what just seems to be the natural character. It just seems to be a part of the body. So the me is that separate energy, or apparently separate energy that's claiming everything. It's that sense of I am. The character just seems to be the natural character. It just seems to be in the body. I mean, you could say that dogs and cats have characters. I'm pretty sure that they're not stuck in a separate experience. I'm pretty sure they don't get together and have radical non-duality meetings, even if they could speak to each other. But so the character just seems to be what's naturally in the body, I would say. And that doesn't change. That doesn't change. And in fact, the character was all there was already anyway, was just the character. So there may be a shy character, a sensitive character, a gregarious, outgoing, loud character, a creative character. Just seems to be just a part of the body, just what appears. But it has nothing to do with the me. The me is that comes out of that contracted sense of I am. Message from Kane. Can you talk about joy? And is it different to unconditional love? Well, again, I would just say that joy just naturally arises in exactly the same way as it does there. Joy can just arise. Anything can arise in the kind of the emotional sense. It's just when there is no one, there's no one claiming that emotion or turning that emotion into something personal or into a personal experience. So emotions are very simplistic, because again, the I complicates things, like we were talking about love earlier, and it just claims everything and seems to just create a very complicated, what's the word, neurotic kind of energy around whatever arises, or tends to in most cases. So joy is just simply joy as it arises, or as it may or may not arise. And is that different to unconditional love? Yes, in a way, because I would say unconditional love is already everything. So joy would be an expression of unconditional love. Sorrow would be an expression of unconditional love. Pain, hurt, anguish, suffering would all be expressions of unconditional love. They would have to be, because it's unconditional. Another comment from Rajiv. I watched so much of non-duality videos whose every word started with awareness, and there was a feeling of this isn't it until I came to Jim's videos, and it was just plain and simple. Any comment on awareness teachings, in your opinion, Neil? So I think there's a question in there somewhere. Yeah, I mean, I would just say yes, the same thing, that when I came across this message, there was an undeniability about it. And yes, it just seemed to just cut right through the ideas that non-duality is about awareness or becoming aware, or non-dual awareness or abiding in awareness, and that non-duality in its true sense, although there's no such thing as non-duality, it's really just a concept, but for the sake of answering the question, non-duality in its true sense points to there is no one. Comment from Nothing Media, smiling in the wind. For some time now, it feels like I am fading away. Striving doesn't seem to appear anymore. Very alone, but not lonely. But happy, not happy, but not unhappy. Thank you, Neil, for keeping it simple. Okay, thank you. Comment from Rajiv. Neil, give an introduction in Jim style. I think each character has their own style and approach to this message, but I would say fundamentally we are all pointing to the absolute as well, so to speak. I wouldn't want to cramp Jim's style. Comment from Dave. What is the difference from radical non-duality versus non-dual awareness? Well, I mean, the radical non-duality is just a term that I cottoned onto, that I've heard being used by others when describing this kind of very direct, confronting non-duality type message. I would say the difference between non-dual awareness is as I said before, that awareness is duality. The I am arises in awareness. It arises with awareness. So I am is awareness. Awareness is I am. So if there is someone to become aware of awareness, then that can only be the I am. So what's being suggested here is the whole sense of I am can collapse. So that whole idea of awareness or becoming aware or pure awareness or abiding in awareness also collapses with the sense of I am. There's nothing to be aware. There's nothing here as being aware. Awareness also, for me, it has a flavor of knowing. To be aware of something, to in some way know something, in some way, has just a flavor of knowing for me. And of course, this suggestion here is that this is just unknowing. Question from Angelica. Is the contraction unconditional love? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with there being an apparent contraction in the body. There's nothing wrong with the appearance or the sense of being I am, or of being a me, or of feeling separate. All there is unconditional love, appearing as everything. It's even the thought that this isn't unconditional love, or I don't feel like this is unconditional love, or I want to know what unconditional love is. You can't know what unconditional love is, because it is all there is. You can't get outside of it to know it. You can't move away from it to objectify it, to know it. You can't contain it. You can't put it under a microscope to be looked at or analyzed, because it is everything. It's even the sense of not being in love. So yes, the apparent contraction in the body is unconditional love, absolutely. Message from Lolo. You speak of the body being cellular. So is there no issue with apparent others on a mission to change the DNA of humans at a cellular level? Or is that just what's apparently happening as well? I have absolutely no idea what's going on with the DNA in bodies. I would speak of the bodies as just being an appearance. I mean, yes, we could start talking about there being cells, and yes, I did say about the contraction being kind of on a cellular level. It's actually subcellular. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of on an atomic level in a way, seems to be. But no, I'm not speaking to the a mission to change DNA. I'm not really sure what's meant by that. Question from Rajiv. Neil, do you watch Jim's videos and Zoom meetings now also? I've sometimes flicked onto a couple, yeah. But sometimes. Yeah, sometimes it's fun to hear the responses, what responses come out. Yeah, but there's nothing needed from that. We're actually trying to organise a Birmingham meeting for Jim. We were going to do it this year in March. So do keep your eyes peeled. We plan for those who are in the UK, of course, or who can get to the UK. We are still thinking of holding a meeting in Birmingham, probably not until next year now, for Jim and Rita to come over and do a weekend meeting. So I'm looking forward to that very much. It'd be very nice to see them and see people when the world isn't coming to an end. Message from Bob. Buddha realized thousands of years ago that we are living in a Maya or a virtual reality, including human bodies. Then he came up with something called the essence, or these days called consciousness. He also mentioned that the essence origin is not the body, but the question remained was, what is the existence of consciousness and how it gets contact with the human body? Okay, yeah. So we're back into really this kind of idea of there being consciousness and that consciousness enters the body. And I used to listen to things like that all there is consciousness, but consciousness wanted to know itself, so it created 7 billion other consciousnesses in order to know itself as consciousness, and all these very long explanations of consciousness. And I used to just get so lost in that kind of thing. And actually, really, that's all just the dream. That's all just the need to know. There is no consciousness. Comment from Shale. Sorry, but I think if everybody looks closely, what it's me, would not have a clue. So how could anything that can't be found apparently disappear? Sounds like a belief to me. Sorry. Yeah, that's okay. And comment from Rajiv. This is whole includes the experience that this is not whole. This is personal includes the experience that this is impersonal. This is without positions includes the experience that this has position. Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing exclusive. There is nothing apart from. So even the separate appearance or the separate experience or the appearance of the separate experience is wholeness appearing as that. But it's illusory, it's not real. So there is no one to self-inquire or look closely at themselves. That would be the dream. There is no one to look closely at themselves and realize that they are nothing or no thing. There is already no thing, and there is already no one. So there is no one to self-inquire into the nature of themselves. That's just a dream. Glenn J, if an apparent separate self never heard of non-duality, that's it as well. All inclusive, so beautiful. No need to do or change or see. This is the peace that surpasses all knowing. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's nothing that's not it. All this, nothing that's not this. I don't tend to say it. Comment from Rob Birmingham. Are you in the Midlands then? If so, will you hold meetings in the future? Yes, I am, and yes, I'm sure I will in the future at some point. Maybe not this year, or maybe towards the end of the year. Yeah, I'm sure that will happen at some point. Comment from Smiling in the Wind. Why is this so addictive? Just love listening to this. Can't talk about this to anyone. I don't understand this myself, so how could I explain it to someone else? Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think it is a Ramana Maharshi quote, one of the few ones that I would quote. I think it's him anyway, where he said that if your head is caught in the tiger's mouth, then your head is caught in the tiger's mouth, and who knows what the tiger will do. And it's very much like this message, I think. Well, for any message that resonates, it doesn't have to be this message. There's no claim to this being the truth or the correct message. It's none of that. But yes, that does tend to be the way. If your head is in the tiger's mouth and your head is in the tiger's mouth, who knows what the tiger will do? It might just bite it off one day. Polka dotted sky. Who or what is that? Who or what is it that recognizes the nighttime dream in the morning when we apparently wake up in this physical world in bed? Well, no one does. It's just a recognition. Of course, when there's a me, then there would be a claiming of that as that was my dream. I had a weird dream last night. And then add it to the story of me. That must mean something because it was my dream. Kane Watts asks, is looking for a center impossible? Yes, because who would be looking? There are no centers. Where would you find the center? From where would you look if there is no separate position and no separation? And Rajiv comments, Jim was that tiger for me. Yeah.
John has a question.
Oh, hello, Emerson. I didn't realize you were carefully, quietly watching there all the time.
He's stalking. He's stalking us like a ninja. Yeah.
Always.
Okay. I listening to what you were saying earlier about love between two people, right? And so it can arise, and even if they feel totally consumed by it, they are still under the illusion that it's one person in love with another, whereas what in reality is arising is just love is arising. And that can happen. Doesn't need a me for that to happen. I can totally get that. But sometimes when I attempt to explain as well as I can what I have understood about non-duality, I'm aware, and sometimes when I've referred people to talks by, I wouldn't say you, but other famous non-duality speakers, sometimes they can come away with a feeling of it being cold, of it. somehow there's something about the remorseless massacre of the self, of the me. Yeah, the absolute zero tolerance for that illusion, which of course is the reality. But there's something about that remorselessness that can look like coldness or uncaringness.
Yeah.
Could you comment? I don't believe it is, but I think it's a me that feels that caringness in the same way that a me will naturally interpret that pure love that's arising as actually a personal thing. And when it becomes personal, it starts getting a bit sort of sticky and messy. I imagine that's what. But could you comment about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally get what you mean. This message doesn't speak to the me at all. So if this is heard, then it's not heard by the individual or by the me. There's nothing in this message for the me. So the me wants to hear that it can do something, or it wants to hear that it can feel better. And yes, and that can be interpreted by some individuals who hear this message as being discompassionate. Is that the right word? Or not being compassionate.
Yeah.
And or not being sensitive to the needs of that particular individual. This message doesn't recognize the individual at all. There is no one. There is no one. When there is no one, why would there be a speaking to the individual or a speaking to the separate experience? It's not even there. It's not even real. So this message just doesn't recognize that there is someone who needs to feel better, or who needs to be spoken to in some way, or shown love, or and I have heard it said about this message. It's not something that I've said, so I may get myself in trouble here if I'm asked to explain this further. That this message is the ultimate compassion, because it denies that separate experience, that which it thinks it needs. It just denies it entirely. That's not an intention to do so. It's not a method, but it just doesn't recognize that separate experience at all. So it gives it nothing.
Yeah.
And it is the separate experience that the seeker longs to be free of. The seeking seems to, particularly for, let's say, spiritual seekers or people, non-duality seekers, the seeking seems to come out of a sense of suffering, because I am separate. So there is a suffering with that, or a discontentedness or a discomfort with that. But the seeking itself seems to engender suffering also. So this message would never say, or it just doesn't, it can't speak to the seeker or give the seeker anything.
Yeah. So really, that the sort of sense in which people would detect a lack of care or a lack of compassion it's still the seeker who wants to be caressed in some way by the apparently enlightened person, and of course that cannot be, because there is no one to caress anyone.
It wants to feel better so that it can own liberation, or own awakening, or own enlightenment. Me wants everything for itself. Me even wants to own no me.
Yes. Yeah. I'm aware as I walk along, sort of trying to just sort of walking along and thinking about this. I realize that how there's this non-stop dialogue in which I am discussing with myself, non-duality even. But I realize how incredible the me, it can claim anything for itself, even the most radical non-dual position. It's capable of setting its flag up there and say, "Oh, I'm here too," and whatever you do, it'll be staking a claim to.
Absolutely, it claims everything for itself. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Or it seems to, anyway. In the story, it seems to claim everything for itself.
No. Yeah, I'm confident that voraciousness is actually illusory.
And that's the dilemma for the individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this can't be owned, it can't be had. Can't be understood, it can't be grasped. Can't be moved towards. Can't be held on to. There's nothing to hold on to.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. We ran out of time. That time went really fast. Thank you so much, Neil. Everyone, unmute yourself. You can say bye.
See you later. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank
See
you,
you later.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.